Let's start with some laughter tonight. Does anyone remember laughter? Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast official review of the podcast, the RFK Tapes, produced by Crime Town. Jeannie Eckert is in the room joining me tonight. She's actually food and is smoking possibly legal substances. How's it going up there? Because you're above, where I am.
Actually, it's really fucking warm. It's humid. and by fucking warm, I mean fucking warm for Vermont. So like mid to high 70s right now.
It's not bad. Yeah, fall is approaching. I feel like I might be getting a cold, so I'll probably be hitting the mute button a lot tonight.
That's actually been going around like since Sunday.
Medicinal, right? That's what I already said last night.
Oh yeah.
Because it has booze in it.
What are you doing?
So I'd like to say I'm honoring the Cellar Door Skeptics who had me on last night by having Michigan beer, but I just have it anyway. This is the new favorite. So Founders is out of Michigan, and they do 6 different barrel-aged beers a year, and this is
Focus. There you go.
Better Half. So this is old ale brewed with molasses and aged in maple syrup bourbon barrels. So if you like hoppy beer, this will probably be your least favorite beer ever, because it's like boozy toffee. That's what it tastes like. It's quite good.
So boozy topping, no hops.
I picked up some extra, whatever IBUs, like a negative, which is great. And then just in case that fails to do the trick, we do have the backup, Dragon's Milk, which is like the official beer of the show now that Going for Two is no longer cry. Okay, so RFK Tapes.
Wait, I still have to try that. Dragon's
Milk. What are you having? Nothing?
Oh, yeah, that wouldn't happen. No, I'm doing Citizen Cider Dirty Mayor again. That's kind of my go-to. Ginger. The mayor makes it clean. The ginger makes it dirty. So, hard cider from Vermont.
Well, I think I might have the long-awaited Waiting for Wrath Part 2 interview next week, and they drank a cider in their last episode. They got to 200, so congrats to them. 200 episodes. Whew. Tell you.
Wow.
So the RFK Tapes. So this show I had heard about because the author of the book Shadow Play by Bill Klaber, he said at the end of, in the back of the book, it was like, oh, we're going to do a podcast about this called the RFK Tapes. So he did this show with Zach Stewart Pontier, who I guess co-produced a podcast called Crime Town that I did not listen to. And this was it was an official 10-episode podcast, but as we found out, they had 2 bonus episodes, as I guess podcasts are wont to do. So now Jeannie is more of a connoisseur of podcasts than I am, I believe, because I feel like I am very narrow in my podcast scope. So had you heard of this one before I was like, we have to listen to this show?
Yes. Yeah, I heard about it through Slow Burn, which was about the Nixon era. So, like, reportive journalism about, like, just having a little bit more perspective. And they got to the end of Slow Burn and said, like, and if you like this, you might like RFK Tapes. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'm bored. And it's a bit of history that I didn't really know a lot about. RFK, I'm aware of history. I know that it has happened. I knew his name. I knew that he was a political force, but I didn't really know much about any of the rest of it. You get the cultural media stuff like Sirhan. The name is going to be around. But any of the actual behind the scenes on any of this, I had no idea. And I didn't even know there was a conspiracy, to be honest. But yeah, this is like it's good popcorn. It's a good popcorn podcast. This is.
Yeah, I got the book Shadow Play because my wife is a book publicist and she gets lots of books, and some of them are not requested by her, and that was one of them. And so I read it.
Wait, so she gives you the books that she doesn't want to read? Is that
what she's just like I actually say out loud, I'm like, I don't have anything to read. She's like, what genre? Like, seriously, it's all over the place. Mm-hmm. So that was one I read, and I had Dan Simpson on, and he, does the street epistemology, and he asked me the question, like, what was something you changed your mind about? And I couldn't think of anything on the spot. And the whole situation, RFK thing, is definitely a place where I changed my mind, and I suppose we can cover that since we're on a podcast and talking about it. So yeah, I read this book, Shadow Play, and it covers a lot of the beats that this podcast covers. So basically the story here is on June 5th, 1968, Robert Kennedy wins the California primary. 1968 was a weird year because Lyndon Johnson technically was going to run for his second term, and I think it was Eugene McCarthy jumped in early and did a primary challenge, and Robert Kennedy wasn't the leader there. And of course, Robert Kennedy, those guys didn't like each other much, Lyndon Johnson and Robert Kennedy.
No, that was an interesting episode.
But Lyndon Johnson just said he wasn't going to run, and I think the primaries had already started. And it was a different time then too. I don't think it was like it is now where people like run. It was mostly like the candidates would just wait for the delegation, the kind of the big gathering, and then they just kind of decide who was going to be president without a lot of votes. But RFK jumped in, decided to run, and on June 5th, 1968, he won the California primary, which pretty much meant he was going to win the Democratic nomination.
Well, he also got talked into it, at least according to the podcast.
Yeah, I don't think he initially was going to do it. And it's so interesting to listen to someone whose legitimate voice sounds like someone doing a bad Boston accent, just because you don't hear politicians with accents as much. Like, you're not allowed to unless you're like super, super local. But he was hanging out with striking workers, and he was making great speeches, and he won. And so he ended up at the Ambassador Hotel. He did a speech, and then he was led through a pantry, and there were tons of people there, and he was shaking hands. And then all chaos happened, and a man named Sirhan had a gun.
Are you just going to sum this up for people, Zach? Jesus.
Ripped out of his hand, and he was arrested, and RFK died the following day. He was shot multiple times, one in the head. I think that was the kill shot. And then we got Richard Nixon, so yay. That's kind of the summary of the, I don't know, for people who've like just heard, RFK died.
Just go listen to the fucking podcast. It's not that long.
Yeah, don't listen to this podcast. Listen to that podcast. Hey. No, we're going to give you important information you can't get anywhere else. You probably can get maybe only 20 other places. That's what we're trying to go for.
Right. So what did you actually think of Disturbance of Fate when you first read it? And I waited until you took a big sip before I asked you that. Are we going to talk
about this book? I do recommend this book because it'll make you super depressed, because Disturbance of Fate, I'm a big fan of alternate history. I don't know if I mentioned that on our book podcast, but what alternate history is as a genre is one thing changes in history. A lot of them have to do with like the South wins the Civil War. But in this book, one of the busboys who shakes RFK's hand sees Sirhan approaching with a gun, and they're able to stop it. And so he doesn't die, and he becomes president, and the United States basically becomes a socialist like utopia.
No, but what did you think? What did you think of the book?
It was very dry. It was written like a history book in that it had actual footnotes, but they're all based on this other timeline. And every once in a while, they refer to what happens in our timeline.
Wait! How do you footnote something that has never happened?
It's weird. It's definitely a unique experience. It's not like any other book I've read. And I've read this 3 times. It's kind of depressing when you think about it. But
okay.
I really enjoyed it.
Do you feel like it was well written then? It was dry, but it was engaging.
I think I can get into the what happened. The fact that like Reagan takes him on in 1972 and loses and becomes a game show host. And I'm like, that's what Reagan should have been, a game show host, not president.
Oh, that would have been fantastic.
And you could tell that the author's like prejudices were there. Apparently, he didn't give a crap about space. So like once we went to the moon, we're like, okay, we're done with space. But like they started,
we won, bitches.
They started email in the 70s. Like the Berlin Wall comes down in the 70s, and the U.S. does become like a socialist. Like basically, nobody can make more than $200,000 a year, and it was like I can't remember the name of the guy who became his vice president, but he was basically another Democrat in Texas. There were two in the 60s apparently, and he was president after him. But it's a good book. I enjoyed it, but we're not talking about a damn book. We're talking about a podcast tonight, right?
Well, wait. Was it?
But you're kind of asking me questions. I like this.
Well, was it written as fiction? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the guy talked to people who knew him, but it's like a nonfiction book in that he refers to like 200 books that he read, about history and the famous.
Was it about relevant history or just history in general?
Well, I mean, it was he read the famous book RFK Must Die, which is something that Sirhan wrote in his notebooks. Young Sirhan, an intriguing character, you have to admit.
Well, and that was one of the things that I think that I appreciated the most about the podcast was I learned. Well, maybe learn is a strong word. I was exposed to more of Sirhan's character through the podcast than I had through just my tangential familiarity with that time and place in history. So to me, he was just a name, but to listen to him on tape and other people's observations of him was very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to get into the like conspiracy aspects or the whole Sirhan kind of story. Obviously, it's weird to have a guy with two of the same name. But
actually, I kind of wonder, like, are they pronounced differently because it's a first name and a last name, but we pronounce them the same because we're American and don't know any better? That was just like one of those passing thoughts.
I mean, I believe his family was either Lebanon or from Palestine, and they came to the U.S. after Israel was created.
Because they were devout Christians.
And like his mom became a Christian, and
I got the impression that he was raised Christian.
He just didn't really have a direction in life. He was a short guy, so he tried to be a jockey. This was one of the key issues. He was a jockey. He fell off a horse. He had a concussion. As a guy who follows football, they talk about CTE, about like long-term concussion issues. And then he kind of got into the occult and this whole self-hypnosis thing.
Yeah, okay, so that's a toilet we can flush and go down that one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we can flush a lot.
Like the whole
I'm dragon powered.
Wow, that was quick. Wait, dude, pace yourself. We're 15 minutes in. Not even. Yeah, but the whole Rosicrucian thing was a little odd, and I actually really did like how the director, the creator, the Zach, the other Zach, not the Zach, not
just
you,
with a C. What a weirdo!
I know, right? What a strange name. I liked how I felt like he was trying to give a good balance between how he interviewed people and like how he kind of paced the tapes out, or the release of the episodes. I felt was an interesting method of storytelling. One of my pet peeves, though. Can we talk about the 40-minute hour? Holy crap! Like this is
the 40-minute hour. What's this?
Oh yeah, no. This is like I timed out one of the episodes to see how long of it was filler, intro, outro, and then ads. And yeah, 1 hour's worth was actually about 40 minutes of actual content. Like this is just.
I didn't think the episodes were that long.
No, just statistically,
it was varying. Like you listen to the Scathing Atheist, and they're always exactly an hour. Well, now like an hour and 30 seconds or a minute because they throw those ads on there, but they're down to the second. And a lot of shows are very like, okay, I'm X amount of minutes. I try to do that, but not really. And this show, yeah, it's one thing I've noticed, like, because I listen to Pod Save America, and they like just do their ads at the beginning, and there's something to be said about like kind of somebody who created this generic music. Well, they had a good theme song as an actual song, but they do like the goofy music that you fast forward through, and then they do the really awkward ads that have nothing to do with the show. Well, it is a crime show. Like, what are they gonna do? Sell guns or bullets? I don't even know what. Ooh. Sell a self-hypnosis tape? Hey, I should do that. That would be cool.
Handcuffs.
There you go. Well, I mean, like, what is cognitive dissonance? They do Adam and Eve. Like, that's them. That's their brand. Do one that's on their brand.
Well, no, I'm just talking about the actual like length of the show. If I'm going to sit down and listen to a show for, like, call it an average of 35 minutes, maybe for the RFK tapes. Really about 20% of that was just ads, filler, intro, outro. You weren't. It's like watching TV. You weren't getting a whole lot of bang for your buck. You know, it's not solid content, which a lot of shows aren't anymore, and I kind of get that. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess I got that a little bit from that slow burn to that Nixon Watergate show, but that's not connected. Now, with the whole Sirhan thing, though, what do you have a feeling of, like, did he just put on? Because Sirhan says, and he maintains this day, he's still in jail. He's been, I don't know how many parole hearings, says that he does not remember the actual shooting. And what the hell is that sound?
Oh, sorry. That is, I'm sitting on black plastic because when Monkey got sick, he got fleas. So, yeah.
Glamorous times.
I know, right? So the sound is my feet sticking or trying to not stick to black plastic while I'm talking to you. I will try to keep that to a minimum. No, so I really, was it in the bonus show, the first bonus show, where they talked about how, like, debunking hypnosis, that kind of brainwashing thing, and that if you are in a position to be brainwashed, it either, I don't know if it was either it takes your voluntary consent. I know that was part of it, but it also takes constant maintenance to live in that sort of cult state of allowing other people to control your actions, your thoughts, your reactions to things. So,
well, they had people hypnotize him.
Well,
and then they had him like say that he would kill RFK because he did have a journal, and then they had him like pick up an imaginary gun and start shooting. And they were, the expert was saying that he was like the most easily hypnotized person. Like, there's something about his personality that made him easily hypnotized.
Ray, do you really think that that's a thing, though?
I don't know if that's a thing. Like, if it was possible to, do the Naked Gun thing and have a random person like shoot somebody for you, you'd think that would happen.
Unless it's play acting.
Years.
That, like, honestly, I really don't think that hypnosis is a thing that happens without consent. Like, you don't get up on a stage, get hypnotized by a stage magician, and then squawk like a chicken. Like, you have to have buy-in on this. You have to be willing to be, like, you have to be willing to go there in your head. And I would say probably also, without knowing more about the topic, you have to be willing to play act whatever brain space you're doing right now. So, like, the whole climbing around on the ceiling and being a monkey, just getting his exercise. Like, no, that's not, I really don't think that's a real thing.
And I can't remember if it was that one investigator where he like sent him this angry letter that I'm going to kill you. Like, like his true personality finally came out, and they like asked him when he was on the stand, like, why did you do it? And he's like, oh, because RFK was in favor of giving jets to Israel, and I'm a Palestinian. But that whole issue happened. He didn't know about it at the time of the murder. He knew about it after the fact. So it was clearly like he was trying to play this role. But is this? I mean, the whole thing, there's this mystery behind it, but people just don't like this little nobody killing this important person. But it just happened. I mean, back then there wasn't Secret Service, and the actual like security guards guarding him were hired by the hotel. Like, he didn't actually want anybody protecting him.
Can we talk about that guy?
The Caesar, the one.
Thane Eugene Caesar, and wow, who names their kid Thane?
Because the story
there should be like a crown involved or something.
It happens in a later episode. One of the points that the author of the book makes is that he is convinced Sirhan had a .22, which is a gun that has 8 bullets in it. Mm-hmm. And 8 bullets were actually shot into people.
Right.
And then there are these alleged other bullet holes that were found and went into the wall and the ceiling, and those disappeared and were destroyed later. So the idea is that there are 2 guns, and then you have to say, well, where's that second gun come from? Well, Caesar, the security guard, one little bit that never was explained very well was that he said that he had a .38 on him at the time. Mm-hmm. So obviously they would find a different caliber bullet if he had shot his gun. But then later they said, oh, he actually owned a .22, but he said he sold it before the assassination. And then they found out he actually sold it after. But then that's one of there's a lot of threads in this thing that end up going nowhere. And that was one of them. But Caesar was one of the guys. He had, I think, RFK's. And I almost like to go into this pantry area and see how small it is and how many people were actually in there at the time. Because I feel like 50 people were in an area the size of this like room I'm in.
Well, I was remembering 70.
Everybody was pressed against each other.
Right. I was remembering 70 plus people. It was a lot of people for a very small room. Unless it was a very large room. But yeah, still 50 people in one area. That's still kind of a lot of people.
So Caesar was a security guard. And by the way, he actually hated Kennedy, which is another fuel for the fire for the conspiracy people. And do we just give everything away? Do we tell people to listen to the show? We give it away. So one of the
nobody listens to this anyway. Whatever.
One of the cliffhangers, not anymore. One of the cliffhangers was the guy investigating, and you'll have to tell me his name. He was like a journalist who was investigating, and somebody told him that the Caesar guy was dead, and this was in the 80s. I guess he's still alive, actually.
Yeah. So that was, I actually wrote that one down. Dan Moldea was the guy who found it.
Dan Moldea was kind of the opposite of the author of the book, Kleber, who believes everything that is consistent with the conspiracy. Well, they were both...
Or they were both friendly.
I mean, there's got to be this weird community, and before the internet, it had to be like, "Ooh, there's somebody else who's investigating this thing I'm investigating."
Right.
And weird,
so
we can do the little secret handshake together, you know?
Yeah. So Dan found Caesar, Thane Eugene Caesar, security guy, supposedly dead, not really dead, but during that recording of the tapes that they took, the way that Caesar laughs, just kind of like kind of blows it off. He's like, ha 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 ha, the whole time, reminds me of a couple of coworkers that I've had in the past who are really fucking shady. Just kind of that, I know better than you. I'm smarter than you. Like, I'm snowing you, and you can't prove a fucking thing. Like, it's just one of those. He didn't
pass the lie detector test, but I'm like, I think it's pretty much been debunked that people can pass the lie detector tests.
Yes. Yeah. So there are so many things that people are just like, well, pass the polygraph test. They proved hypnosis. I'm like, yeah, except that was 1968, bitch. Like, we've done more things about the human mind since then. We know better.
Have we? Are we better? I'm not sure about that.
We're probably a little bit more clear on a few things. Let me put
perhaps it that way. We could talk about the 2-gun theory, the multiple shot theory. And so with the JFK, we have the Zapruder film. So we have actual film of him being shot. With RFK, we have nothing the moment of the shooting. But there was one journalist who had a tape recorder in his pocket and recorded the moment the shooting happened. And the author of the book had a ballistics expert, and I'll just say expert with my finger guns.
Yeah, because podcast people can see you.
Review the shots, and he said he heard 13 shots.
Right.
And Sirhan's gun, as we know, as we've been paying good attention this whole time, only had 8. What say you, Jeannie? What say you?
I think that people have fallible memories. That people are able to convince themselves of a number of things. Like, I know, like, I've done it. I've watched other people do it. That in hindsight, you can make whatever your personal narrative fits whatever seems most viable to you. That's the nature of human brains. We just do that. So I don't know if that was him. I honestly, well, I don't know, but honestly, like, I kind of don't care, Zach. Like, it was fun entertainment. Like, it was an interesting mental exercise to watch people go through. It was more interesting to me to watch people develop as characters throughout this whole process, and to see all the people that were involved than it was to actually know about the story, because the story's it's still history. RFK is still fucking dead. That's not going to change. Like, I'm sorry. That's
Yeah, I think one of the things we get to as atheist non-believers is people still want to be like 100% certain of something. And when it comes to history, if you really study it, it's never that case. But with this book, because it came up, it said, hey, I got these conspiracies, and let me show you all these things that make it look like more than one person killed him, and that Sirhan was controlled by government agents, and that there were multiple guns, and the guy holding him, who was a security guard, had a gun and didn't like him. And then when you listen to the podcast, the guy doing the podcast actually checked other sources. So he talked to the audio,
like journalism or something.
He talked to the audio expert, and the audio expert said, well, at the very beginning, there were 2 gunshots, but I couldn't really hear them. But because people said, witnesses, and we can also talk about witness testimony, what it actually means ultimately, not much. He was like, well, I don't know. And so he actually reached out to other audio experts he knew, and 2 other ones, and neither of them could come up with more than 8 shots, because they did like the wavelength of what a gunshot should sound like, and they only got 8. So in the end, it was like there were a lot of noises in that room, clearly with 70 people in a 10-foot square room.
Whatever the number was.
You're going to hear a lot of sounds.
Well, and also, like, I kind of wonder, too, how much of that is influenced by, like, Sirhan was supposed to be no more than a couple feet away, or not any closer than a couple feet away. And was it like 2 or 3 of the bullet wounds in Kennedy were point blank within inches? So
what they said, was that Sirhan was facing Kennedy, and Kennedy was shot from behind. So they're like, well, clearly he couldn't have killed him because of that. And they're forgetting the fact that, like, as soon as a gunshot goes off, every person in the room turns around. So Kennedy, I don't even know. I don't think I have the whole like shot progression, but it's possible I think it was like he may have turned or he may have fallen, and like the second shot, Sirhan got the gun right up to his head and hit him.
But if other witnesses are saying that he was no closer than to like 1.5, 2 feet, how could there be powder burns from an inch or inches away? That just
I would like them to do a test, like, okay, people who don't know what's going to happen, shoot off a gun 2 feet away from them and see, are they still looking at the shooter, or are they turned away and can't see and are like, oh, I know what he looks like. So that part kind of fell apart to me, because he was like, well, he was
make Sirhan any closer. That doesn't make him any physically closer. In fact, if Kennedy was falling or turning away, he probably would have been further away.
If he turned away, then he could hit him from the, because it said like he was coming up.
2 feet, inches.
That's what people say they saw, and they may have seen the first shot. I don't think anybody in that room, even Kennedy, like expected that to happen. I think that's one of the reasons why he could get away with it, is that nobody expected that. Why did JFK get shot? Like, people were like, do you need to be in an open car driving down the street with like a red target on your head? Maybe not.
Yeah.
And then a guy who was like trained by the military with a rifle, that was, I mean, he didn't even hit him the first shot either.
Wait, so wait, what did you think about Sirhan having spent, what was it, something like 7 hours earlier that day at a shooting range with the 22? Like just in general?
A bit of an issue. Like, he clearly knew how to use the weapon. And well, I mean, they did say that people grabbed his hand and like held him down after the second shot, so he couldn't have hit Kennedy more. But it's another like kind of witness situation.
I'm not a gun nut, but I've been out on a shooting range a couple of times. 7 hours, like, that just seems like a really long time to spend just shooting your 22. You know, like that seems like
that's
a little...
true. I was
that's
I think once a friend of mine who had guns like took me, and many people shot the guns, and we were there an hour.
Yeah, I went out with my dad when I was back in Alaska.
It does seem like okay.
Yeah, we were out for like an hour and a half, and we probably shot 4 different kinds of guns. You know.
Okay, so we got the bullets maybe not covered, which is kind of the point. What about the girl with the polka-dot dress? Who the crap was that? And
I don't know, but
they didn't. One thing I wanted them to do was like, okay, you say Sirhan didn't shoot him, like he couldn't have shot him. Mm-hmm. Give me an alternative.
Right.
When it comes to the girl in the polka-dot dress, so the story is that a volunteer was like sitting.
You're just, I don't even know. Make them listen to the fucking podcast.
I don't know if she was smoking a cigarette. Fuck that shit. He was sitting out smoking a cigarette, and a woman came out with a polka dot dress and said, "We killed him," and like was celebrating. And she had another guy with her, and they left.
She went in with 2 and came out with 1. That was the other part of that story.
Yeah, they said there was this other guy with her, but because the story that Sirhan said was that he just was going and looking for parties, and he went to a party and drank a bunch of Tom Collinses, so he was like drunk, and he went to the Ambassador Hotel looking for coffee, and so he ended up in the kitchen because he's looking for coffee, but
because one just wanders into a hotel kitchen.
He did say he was talking to a woman, and many people there said polka dot dress. And then when Kennedy was killed, the cops said, "Hey, we're looking for this woman." And then 24 hours later, they were like, "Never mind." Right, and they really did press the witness. Like, they wanted her to change her story.
Yeah, there are 2 separate ways that we can go from that, which is one, like, I'm assuming that on occasion, I know that you're not a big coffee drinker, but when's the last time that you wanted coffee and you just wandered into a hotel kitchen to go get coffee? Have you ever done that?
It was the 60s, different time.
Well, I was going to say, and if you
I bet it was a little, it had to have been crazy in that hotel, just because.
Well, I'm sure
there was like no security of any kind. RFK, anybody was in there.
Wait, so here's the other direction: is it went down how it was LA, right? How the LA police handled the whole thing, and you and I have seen enough history of LA police. They haven't always been as good as they are now. I'm not sure even how good they are now, but I know that they're in some ways a lot better than they were when, I don't know.
OJ.
Well, among other things. My sister was there in was it like 90, 89, 90 when the riots happened. So, there have been times where the LA police have been less than stellar. And like you said, other times. So, like, not to diss on who police are now and how they're trying to behave now, or at least some of them are. But I would say that there's probably a lot more shady shit going on just in general. So how much validity does that argument have of, did the LA police kind of either like let it happen, encourage it to happen? That whole thing where they were trying to pull people over for, is that what, traffic
They
violations?
did say they offered, I think, RFK like an escort, and he said no, and then they ended up giving him a ticket because
No,
they were like they were
like
speeding, I think.
no continual tickets for running red lights. So they were traffic
Right.
violations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
So
was that aspect of. So there were what was it, door frames that appeared to have bullet holes, and that was one of the big cases they made, was that these bullet holes existed, but all 8 bullets that were shot ended up in
right.
people.
Well, and the door
And
frame,
they were destroyed.
right? That's the other part of this.
What,
Is
like a
like,
year after the case, like Sirhan was found guilty, and that was that weird time in California where they actually sentenced him to death, but then they ended the death penalty, so he had
right.
life with a very no chance in hell of parole.
So
Kind of.
does that to you not seem sketchy? The LA police, or that the crime department, whatever was involved in that, would have destroyed that door frame. I mean, somebody who's just been,
Yeah, like the guy doing the ballistics wasn't so good.
well, that part too, but just in general, like, I could see it if this was like a nobody, like if I got shot and a year later my door frame is gotten rid of. Okay, I like, that's plausible. This is fucking RFK. He just won the Democratic. He just won it.
Just
Yes, like by minutes. Like she's
say it
just like,
like you believe it.
fuck it, like 364. Yeah, burn it.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really, like that's how you're gonna treat evidence. I don't care who you
Well, it
are.
was very much the author believed that they were bullet holes, and then it was the other journalist that you mentioned who investigated it, and he actually found the cop
Right? He was like,
who
yeah, no,
circled the what looked like holes, and it turned out to be a motorcycle cop, not somebody who had any official training to say that these were. Of course,
like
if you're a
for,
cop, you should maybe know what a bullet hole looks like.
well, but again, different times. So
And
how
then
much
everybody who
we're
looked at it was like, "Yeah, that's a bullet hole." But of
well,
course, because
yeah.
there's nothing to examine anymore, then that just adds to the kind of conspiracy fire. It's like if something's missing.
And like you were talking, like these are different times too. Like I don't really know what forensic training was like in 1968 for motorcycle cops.
Probably not so good.
Yeah, just like could be nail holes, you know, and like, good these holes where they like head height. There's no station that at least was discussed in the podcast. So were these an upward angle, a downward angle? Like if there was a penetration of some sort, was it just straight in? That would have been a
She
nail
said
hole.
penetration.
I did say penetration. See, dude, I try not to make you talk about sex because I know you get really uncomfortable, but you bring it up. So there.
I am so sweaty right now. You would not believe it. It's not just the light on my face.
He just said sweaty.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as a connoisseur of podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
did you like kind of the technical skill of this one? Maybe we can even talk about that one bonus like live episode that
Oh God.
and what you thought of it. I don't even say anything. I'll leave it up to you.
Actually, overall, I thought the production value was really good. Again, still that 40-minute hour kind of bummed me out. There's a lot of filler, but that's bubblegum entertainment, which was good and it was entertaining, which I just said 8 times. Educational, entertaining, something to think about, but not serious. Like there are other podcasts that I either listen to for entertainment or for education. This was kind of a weird TV mix of both of them. But overall, like the sound quality was good. The storytelling I thought was good. The pacing of it, where the other Zach laid out
The other white me.
Yeah, the other white you laid out the progression of the investigation in a very interesting way. I really did like, actually, which is something that you don't get in a whole lot of this type of podcast or journalism in general, is a lot of kind of the behind the scenes, like the back and forth, the bickering, the dissension, where they're actually being real people. They're not just being people on mics, but there's actual frustration and disgruntlement, and you could kind of tell these guys had been together in a car for far too long, a couple times.
Yeah, the author of the book was not happy with the producer at the end because he didn't
agree with him.
Was like, I don't know about this, and goes like, come on, I've been studying this for 50 years, dude.
Right. So that part I actually did find refreshing, just because it seems like a much more honest way to show humanity, to show how we actually should be talking to each other. You know, where there is a back and forth, and there is a, well, what about this? And like, I feel like you're not hearing me, or, you know, like, why don't you understand? Like, these are conversations that normal people really, really have. So I did like that part. But holy fuck, like that bonus episode, what the hell was going on with that music? Really?
Yeah, so they did a live episode, and I know it's a dream of every podcast to do a live episode, but it doesn't always work out because it was really short. It was cool that they had the investigative journalist and, of course, the author of the book. And the journalist and the author of the book were kind of, you know, squaring off a little bit. But then they had like 2 original songs, and one was about the polka-dot dress. And it was like these, like, I understand that you kind of want to give your show a little bit of breathing air with this stuff, but it just didn't seem to work. And I wanted to hear those 2 guys kind of, because they've been like debating with each other for probably 30 years. I like, yeah, have at it. That's interesting, because they're clearly like very strong about what they believe. And the one guy kind of changed his mind. I mean, like I said earlier, when I read the book, I was like, ooh, I think there had to be some second person. And by the time I listened to this podcast, I was like, no, Sirhan did it. Like,
really?
Okay, as sure as I can be sure of anything. Like, I can't say I'm like 99% sure, but I'm sure enough to go, yeah, I think I've investigated this enough. I can probably pay attention to something more important like fantasy football, you know? Or
no,
this.
I don't think that you're wrong. Like, I'm fairly sure that Sirhan did it. I don't think that the history that is being told about him is honest. But one of the things that I did give, what was the author's name? Was that Bill?
Bill Klaber? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, like, I did give him credit for, one, just going on the journey of this, what it took like a year to record. And then 2, once the recording is done and everything has been released, he still shows up for a live podcast in order to, like, I think that he and Zach, even if they disagree, they respected each other enough to bother having that conversation. So that was nice. But I really did feel, I think probably the same way that you did too, that the music was kind of thrown in when tensions got a little hot.
And was it.
And he's like, yeah, we're going to go to a live song now. Hit it.
Exactly.
Just to kind of like let everything kind of cool down so they could do a little bit of a wrap up. But then we got well, you said that there was no Zapruder film, but there kind of was that the dude with the podcast that dropped the other bonus.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was, because that was in the book. So this story was about
Don't
a guy.
tell the story, Zach. Jesus, you're fired. You're horrible.
Why not? Hey,
Make them
spoiler alert! Listen to the whole damn show and then listen to this show.
Yes, exactly.
What I kind of liked about this was, with conspiracy theories, is they always want to have stuff that kind of fuels the fire and agrees with them. Well, This was an entire story about a guy who said, no, I was on the steam table and I took pictures, and the LAPD got rid of, like, destroyed my pictures. And so he actually went to trial, and it turned out that he totally lied about being there. And it was another photographer that was on the steam table. And even his friend was like, dude, you weren't in the room when this happened. And he actually won, but it got appealed, so he never made it. I mean, money was probably good. Because the guy was like trying to sell like this story of this 15-year-old kid who just happened to show up at the RFK murder, and he didn't. and that was it. And it was kind of like
spoiler alert.
Jesus. It was like a meh to the whole thing. But maybe that's how you got to feel about this whole podcast. You're like, well, okay, it was an interesting event in American history, but yeah, now you have to move on and go on with life.
You did say that was in the book that you read, The Disturbance of Fate.
No, let's say The Disturbance of Fate is the alternate history book. The Shadow Play is the book that Bill Klaber wrote that included that story and more stuff than the podcast could have covered.
How did you feel about that part when you read it? And did you feel like the podcast episode, the bonus one, did you feel like that covered it sufficiently? At least enough to get the point across?
Yeah, it did cover it pretty well. And when I read it, I was like, well, what was the point in the end? Because ultimately I was like a story that didn't really move the plot forward at all. It just kind of like showed that people were trying to insert themselves into history when they were not involved at all. And I don't know if I blame people for doing it. Like you have to like take this human aspect into it. Like people's memories are going to change. I think I talked about my own personal memories this week and how I cannot trust them. And you just have to kind of go, okay, that's the story you told. I'll decide whether I take it or not. That's
probably why they left it out. But then there were other things too that I felt like had a similar flavor, like the girl in the polka dot dress. Like that was a story that was interesting, but it didn't really, because there was no
payoff to that.
Right. There was no outcome. There was no, the cops kind of just said, well, good enough. Got an answer.
Well, I mean, in the actual trial, and this, I don't know if this came up in the podcast, there was like a RFK staffer who wore a dress that was kind of like that. And they're like, yeah, she was it. And that was it. Game over.
Oh, interesting. No,
they did like, that's close enough. Now let's move on. And really, I mean, if you did investigate, like if someone found her and she's still alive, it'd be like, oh, this is just some crazy person probably. Or just somebody who showed up. We have no idea what really happened. It'd probably be way less interesting when we found the truth.
Probably. But yeah, I would say like the majority of the people that were involved in this are dead, so.
I mean, that's the thing, like.
Starting with RFK.
Like, I know, he was the first.
He's such a trendsetter.
Like, what was the one about World War II that HBO did? Like, it was good that they caught the people. Some of the people who were involved were still alive. Like, you gotta, like with this, it's good to get the stories of the people who were there because, yeah, I mean, the woman who was the 19-year-old staffer, she's like my parents' age. She's 69,
Right.
It's weird that my parents are 69, by the way.
Wow, your parents are young.
My dad is 69.
Well, so are you.
Right. Math, yes. I know. My parents are born the same month, so my dad is 69, my mom's 68, but she'll be there soon. But yeah, that's I feel like that's a wrap. Is there anything else that you want to kind of cover about this? Is there something you're just burning to talk about?
I'm burning to talk about. Well, there are a couple other places that I think would be interesting, but we don't have to do it. But just, yeah. Like the Death March. Who's next?
Who's next?
Yeah, and really,
everybody.
Like, honestly, I had a question too. If we were dying for time, what do you want to have happen when you die? But I'm not going to ask you that. I'll wait for. Hang on.
I hear a little choking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, just.
I had a little funeral bit last week because we attended kind of a life celebration of someone my wife knew.
No, I'll ask you later, Zach. We don't have to.
And it was, I prefer the people tell stories about your life other than the sales pitch for Jesus funerals that I've attended.
Well, you want to wait.
The person doing the funeral knew nothing about the dead person, and it just makes me sad. So I like that, like the people who knew this person want to tell stories and kind of continue their story. Like, continue RFK's story. He's worth talking about.
Why? He's dead.
There you go. You're strong. So, okay, well, we'll throw this up to you. I'll leave this up to you. Mm-hmm. So I did an audio version of a story I published in a newspaper earlier this year. Mm-hmm. Did you listen? And what was your feel?
That was published about you.
Well, I wrote it. So it was clearly about
did you really? Well, okay, so obviously...
Did I really? Wait.
No, obviously,
we might have to have a talk off camera. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I've been doing things like cramming on for the listen for this.
Mm-hmm. I don't blame you.
And, you know,
P.S. I gave you a lot of homework.
Cat that's trying not to die. So there's that too. Yeah, no, I actually honestly don't love you that much, Zach. I will listen next week. That's how much I love you.
Well, at least the truth is out.
So, yeah.
It felt a little self-indulgent, but the story that started this whole thing was set at 9/11. I'm like, let me post it on 9/11. Let me read the story out loud. And so I did. So if you want to check out episode 159, that features me telling the story. And it only goes 20 minutes. So if you think this 45, 50-minute show is long, that's a lot shorter. Although it is just me talking, so that's a downside, I guess.
No, stop it. I've heard your history about like your version of 9/11 story. I've heard it, at least variations of it, a number of times.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really interested to see what this one comes out like, because I'm wondering what interesting bits you're going to have forgotten to include. And I'll yell at you offline later for that. But
blame the editor. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
I didn't read the original, whatever, 4,000 word version. This is the shortened 2,600 version. Yeah.
Yeah. He's shit. Just fire him.
Her.
Oh, her.
Oh, sexist as hell.
Oh, I thought you were talking about yourself and like. Yeah.
I didn't edit. Yeah. I needed a professional editor. Okay. Well,
I know people who do that.
I won't ask you to tell a joke because you already said you didn't come up with one, because that isn't really what this episode's about.
No. Okay. Can I tell you one of my favorite punchlines, though?
Sure.
Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. And I'll tell you the joke offline.
Drink in, drink out.
Drink in, drink out. Cheers.
It was good. Thank you, Jeannie, for being on. Thank you for... I feel like I owe you something in like the afterlife for making you listen to a podcast twice. So feel free to send your recommendations to me for other shows. Maybe we'll try this again another time. Maybe you, me, and Deborah like something we all listen to, and then we can do a recap like this. We'll do like a weekend version where you can even have any more beer. So.
Oh, she's boring. We don't talk to her.
Oh, well, that's a good point. She's been on a while. I know she's really jealous when she doesn't show up.
I know. Is she in the chat room right now?
She is, and Amy's in there as well.
Hi, Amy.
I sent Amy a beer picture just, because I care, not because I happen to be drinking. That's nothing to do with it. I sacrifice for you people. You don't get it. You just don't get it. So 50 years later, RFK is still dead. And feel free to listen to the very much spoiled RFK tapes at your own leisure. So good night, everybody.
I'm gonna send you a link, Zach, for a song.
Good idea.